The big fear from consumers is, am I overpaying? But what advice should knowledge brokers be delivering to those home shoppers who have that fear?
That's such an important question, Byron. I'm glad you're asking it that way because I think that is exactly the main question for most people today. Um, and I'll mention a few things on this. Number one, let's start with whenever you say, am I overpaying or am I paying more than this is worth? You got to have a baseline, right? So, what is your baseline? And I think for most people, naturally, the baseline is 2008, or I should say 2006 through 2010, right? The first time we experienced collectively as a country a huge decline in both transactions and prices, and that's not that far in the past, so it's fresh for most people. And so naturally, they'll refer to that period when saying, am I paying today like people did in 05, 06, only to end up with a house that's devalued? Um, and in terms of market fundamentals, at very least, who are not in the same boat. 2003 through 2006, we saw a tremendous amount of overbuilding. And that's in addition to all the financial market aspect where we saw the no doc, no income, no assets, no job. Those kind of loans, they're no longer here. FICO scores record high. Underwriting, if anything, underwriting has been extremely disciplined, and if in fact almost maybe too tight in the last 10 years or so. So that is already different. Now, the other thing I'll mention, because I think is important. Whenever you worry, am I going to overpay for this house? The big question is, over what time horizon? Because that's important, right? If you bought in 2000, and if you had to sell in 2007, 2008, it's very likely you still had some degree of equity. Now, I remember shopping for a house in those years, and I looked at homes that owners bought in 2005, 2007, and were trying to sell them in 2010. Yeah, they took a huge loss on that. That's why I think time horizon matters. And for buyers, and especially for agents as they talk to buyers, this is something that's very important to get clarity on, particularly for buyers. How long do you expect to live in your house? Because if you expect to live in your house for the next year or two, maybe you are overpaying. Not so much on the outright value of the home, but think about the fact that buying and selling a house has transaction costs. So if you don't think your job is going to be stable in the next 2 years, if you plan to move in the next 2 years, maybe you should think a little bit about what you're paying, because you're not necessarily going to come ahead. If you're going to be in your house 5 years or longer, on the other hand, it's a very different time horizon. So the third item I'll add to this, and I think this is so important, particularly for buyers' confidence, and agents know this and understand it, but I think it's worth reiterating. We're in an environment in which the market is not temporarily or momentarily undersupplied. We are structurally underbuilt. And I say that because when I look over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the United States has grown in population. The household formation numbers, right? People striking out on their own after college, people getting married and starting a new household. Those have not only rebounded from the last recession in 2008-09, but have actually grown tremendously. What hasn't happened over this period has been enough new construction. And so by various calculations, we are underbuilt, from anywhere to like 2.5 million to possibly 5 million new homes. What that means is there are more people wanting to buy homes than there are actually homes in the market. And it's not just because of the pandemic and because low interest rates and all the temporary issues. It's a fact we have not built enough homes for the population growth. As a result, if you're buying a home today, even if builders, double the volume of new homes that they're building, and they're not, your market balance is not going to be in an overbuilt situation for a long time. So, long answer to say, yes, it feels like we're paying, a lot of money for homes today, and compared to 3 years ago, yes, it's a lot of money. At the same time, the market dynamics are different in that way, and we need a lot more new construction just to bring us in an equilibrium state, let alone one in which we can worry about an outright massive decline in prices.
Yeah. I think Lisa was waiting for an important call, by the way, and so she may
Yes.
may or not join us back. I have one last question, and then I don't know what Tom will want to finish with. Mine's about the affordable housing. So, yes, we have a shortage of new homes, and you mentioned that. And we keep saying we need to build more homes, build more homes. The average sale price in this country right now on new homes is over $550,000. The median sale price on new homes is over $450,000. So if we keep saying we need to build more homes, and we build more of those, I don't believe we're going to meet the demand of affordable options for home shoppers today. It's why you see 20, 30, 40 offers on a $350,000 home, which is more in line with median pricing across the country. I've got my thoughts on how to bring more affordable homes to the market. You stimulate the top and you stop the stimulation of the bottom crap where you give somebody a great closing cost who's a home shopper who's just competing on those $300,000 homes. You maybe stimulate the builder by saying we're going to take regulation out in the
Hmm.
trade-off that you build, single unit product at a particular price point. But I'd love your opinion, George. How can we get more new homes that are affordable into the market today?
And Byron, I think you're on the money. And to give some perspective, it wasn't that long ago. And by that long ago, I mean late 90s, even 2000s, and I make that distinction because from that point going backwards all the way to 1950s, we had the same market. And here I'm going to describe it to you. It was a market in which, along with existing homes, new homes were available for every price range and wallet. We're talking, going back in time to the Sears home, they got shipped to your, property on a truck, right?
I've
I
sold a
looked at
couple
the
of those.
Yeah, well, there you go. You've seen them, right? So, which were really low priced. To the planned subdivisions where you can have an entry level, mid level, upper level home, all the way to the luxury custom products. And again, if you look back, late 90s, early 2000s, that was still the case, right? You could find entry level homes in parts of the country. I'm thinking here, affordable Midwest, the South, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, those parts. You could find an entry level brand new home for less than $100,000. Um, Granted, we're not in that environment, but what we saw post Great Recession was an environment in which the entry level new home or even the mid level new home absolutely disappeared from the map. Some of that, and to your point, right, some of that is down to regulations. The fact that zoning, by and large, in a lot of communities across the country, zoning regulations are still stuck in a 1960s, 1970s period, a very different America than what we have today, and they haven't really, been changed to reflect the changing economy, the changing times, the changing preferences. So changing some of those already is likely to yield more productivity. And we're seeing, California has increased some of its density. The bottom line here is minus some geographic restrictions. Think here, Boston, New York, San Francisco, where you have physical boundaries you cannot build out. A lot of communities have space to build. It's just that they don't necessarily want to approach it from that way today. So to your point, Byron, removing some of that, I think, would, or at least adjusting it to encourage builders to be able to leverage lower costs, at least during the permitting and development process, could lower the price of a new house. In addition to that, and I think importantly, the cost of construction are also fairly variable. I mean, I just looked this week, cost of lumber, just raw lumber, 1,000 board feet of lumber, $344. Before the pandemic, they were running about the same range. During pandemic, naturally, we saw them shoot up to $1,400 per thousand board feet. We're away from that reality. So the cost of lumber has come down. Trade routes have reopened. So by and large, some of that could be reflected in the final price. I know for builders, they have the labor cost, which those haven't gone down. But at the same time, I'm with you. I think there are several places in which we can make changes, even if at the margin, to actually bring that cost down. And that's before we even get into any technological solutions, right? And I'm thinking here, you look at the 3D printing. Um,
Mm.
Several companies are competing in this space. I think one of them is Icon out of Texas. To me, a huge accomplishment. I think it was in the last 3-4 months when they were able to actually build, I think it was a house in Houston, and end up putting a second story, right? So the limitation on the concrete, the technique was they could only build one stories. Now they're trying to push the boundary of that technology forward. So I do think that some of these are also important to leverage in the construction process in a way that lowers that cost. Bottom line, here's the way I look at it, Byron. Uh, we have had the blessing of a growing population which has grown our economy. At the same time, we've covered our eyes and ears during the last 2-3 decades, sort of in denial over the fact that we actually need to build housing to accommodate all these people. Right, this is something that we all have to collectively come to terms with, that it's important enough to do something about it, and solutions at that point I think will be much more feasible.